Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles. Today, in this Tier 7 domination battle here on the Seychelles map, we have Sheep 21 in the lead ship of her class, the Tier 7 Royal Navy battleship HMS King George V. The King George has a curious calibre of main gun armament, especially at Tier 7. This ship's equipped with 14-inch guns, at a tier where most of her contemporaries have moved on to 15 and sometimes even 16-inch. The reason for this is because she was a treaty battleship, the London Naval Treaty of 1936 to be precise, which meant that in order to meet the weight restrictions that she was going to be built under and still have enough armour to be able to serve in the front of a battle line and be fast enough to not be constantly slowing down her escorts, they couldn't actually give her the 16-inch guns that Churchill, who was the First Lord of the Admiralty at the time, wanted, because she would have exceeded the treaty limits, which is kind of ironic because she was being designed and built at a time when the Royal Navy's chief naval competitors, Italy in the Mediterranean and Japan in the Pacific, had renounced their treaty obligations and were basically building whatever the hell they wanted. But the Royal Navy continued to observe the letter of the treaty, and thus the King George V class of battleships were built with the 14-inch guns that were readily available rather than the 16-inch guns, which for example were fitted to the Rodney and the Nelson, or even the 15-inch guns that were fitted to ships like HMS Queen Elizabeth and the other Queen Elizabeth class battleships like the Warspite. That's not necessarily a bad thing though, because if Churchill had gotten his wish and the King George V had been fitted with 9 16-inch guns, rather than the 10 14-inch guns that the ship ended up with, well, first it would have probably considerably delayed construction of the ships, because nobody really has a whole bunch of 16-inch gun barrels just lying around. Not every navy can make 16-inch gun barrels, and those that can, well, they're very difficult to make and they take a long time. The other issue was that in order to fit this ship with 16-inch guns, they would have been the BL 16-inch Mark I, the same guns that were fitted to the Nelson class battleships. And the problem with these guns was that, well, not to put too fine a point on it, they were kind of shit. Unlike, for example, the 15-inch guns, or, well, to be more precise, the 15-inch armour-piercing shells fired from the 15-inch guns mounted on ships like the Hood and the Warspite, which were low muzzle velocity, comparatively, but very heavyweight shells. The BL 16-inch Mark I guns fitted to the Nelson-class battleships fired very high muzzle velocity, but also very lightweight shells. And they were terrible. The muzzle velocity was so high, the barrels wore out in almost no time at all, and they were horribly inaccurate. The proposed solution was to design heavier weight shells and lower the muzzle velocity, which sounds simple, except it isn't. Because not only do you have to design and then test an entirely new type of armour-piercing shell, but also all of the loading mechanisms and the ammunition handling mechanisms and the hoists in the turrets also have to be redesigned to take into account handling the new shell. And this was the middle of the 1930s, and there just wasn't the money for it. And we did actually happen to have a number of 14-inch gun barrels just lying around waiting to be used. King George V did have new turrets designed though, because we'd never put 4 guns in a single turret before, which was the case in this class of ships. There was 1 quadruple turret forward, as well as 1 quadruple turret aft, with an additional 22,000 damage on the enemy carrier, which is nice. Sorry, getting sidetracked. With an additional twin turret up front for a grand total of 10 guns. And the guns were fine. There was nothing wrong with the guns. They may have only been 14-inch or 356mm in calibre, but they were good guns. The turrets, however, when they worked, they were amazingly good. They were very, very good turrets. The thing is, because so much attention had been paid to flash protection during the loading process, to ensure that, kind of ironically, the thing that was going to happen to HMS Hood wouldn't happen to the King George V or her sister ships. The turrets and the ammunition handling and loading facilities underneath the turrets leading to the magazines had a complex interlocking system of gears, armoured doors, ammunition hoists, all kinds of good stuff that when they worked correctly, and most of the time they did, would ensure that any problem anywhere in the process would not spread anywhere else. You know, they were very, very safe turrets. The issue was the design tolerances were so tight that under prolonged use, they could suffer failures, as happened during the showdown with the Bismarck, when over a period of 30 minutes... Oh, that was his first kill. I mean, these guns aren't bad, you know. I mean, they may only be 14-inch, and yeah, you do not adjust your sets. It's a Royal Navy battleship, and he's not just spamming high explosive and everything, because the armour-piercing shells are actually pretty good. Use them at the right time, you'll get much, much better results. He wouldn't have Citadel no carrier have been spamming high explosive and everything. But anyway, back to the showdown against the Bismarck, where over the course of 30 minutes, King George V fired more than 330 shells at, well, actually, it fired nearly 1,000, but of the nearly 1,000 that it fired, we're also including the secondary gun batteries, more than 330 14-inch shells were fired from these guns, and the turrets operated flawlessly for the first 30 minutes. Then, oh, check out the torpedo beats. Very manoeuvrable battleship, by the way. When she was built, she was the fastest battleship in the Royal Navy, although she wasn't as fast as some of the battle cruisers like the Hood, for example, or the Renown. But she is definitely not slow. But yeah, the guns and the turrets operated flawlessly for the first 30 minutes. Because naval battles aren't usually over as quickly as they are in World of Warships, by the way. The fight between the Hood and the Bismarck being one of, well, very few but very notable exceptions. But after 30 minutes of flawless operation, the interlock mechanisms started to fail, the guns started to jam, and HMS Dorsetshire was sent in to finish the Bismarck off with torpedoes. In the summer of 1941, all 5 King George V class battleships, King George himself, the Prince of Wales, the Duke of York, Anson and Howe, were pulled in for refits to have their gun and turret mechanisms overhauled as a direct result of the deficiencies exposed in the ship's turrets as a result of the experience of the King George V against the Bismarck. The ship was built in my hometown, by the way, at the Vickers Armstrong dockyard at Walker in Newcastle upon Tyne. There are no dockyards on the river anymore. They haven't been for at least 30 years. that industry got shut down a long time ago. I did actually get the chance to visit the dockyard and see ships under construction when I was a kid before everything got shut down. I actually visited the best ship I ever served on, HMS Newcastle, the Type 43 destroyer, when I was, 7 years old? Possibly 8. I was in primary school. It was a school visit after the ship had been constructed, but before it had been commissioned. There's more than a few ships featured in World of Warships that were actually built at this dockyard, not just HMS King George V. You'd be quite surprised. Oh, this is looking pretty good, actually. That's the Auber that dared to shoot at him. It's not going to do that again. But yes, going back to the list of ships that were actually constructed, I mean, there's a lot of ships that were constructed at the Walker Naval Yard in Newcastle. But the ones that were built there that are actually in World of Warships, well, obviously you have King George V, but you also have the Tribal class destroyers, HMS Cossack and HMS Eskimo. You have the Crown Colony class cruiser, HMS Uganda, sort of the precursors to the ships like the Belfast. And then Canada, I hope you're paying attention, because 3 of your best and certainly most famous ships, HMCS Athabaskan, Huron and Hyder, were all built at the Walker Naval Yard on the River Tyne in my hometown of Newcastle. You're welcome. Anyway, back to the battle. Sheep 21 has been kicking ass and taking names here, and is losing horribly, despite his team having a fairly stiff kill advantage. They only have the 1 cap circle, and they're behind 200 points. You know, it bears repeating, and I do keep saying it. Kills are good, but kills only matter if you can kill everybody on the enemy team. Caps are what win battles, because the enemy team have 3 of them, and they're winning the battle. It's also kind of at this point in the battle where I'm starting to wonder exactly what kind of crack pipe several members of Sheep's team are smoking. Because the Mayhan, if you look at the map all the way up there to the north, has only just now turned around because he was heading away from the nearest cap circle, the one with the enemy submarine in it. Somebody else on the team was saying, Mayhan, get the sub, which does seem like good advice. Because there's nobody else up there. You know, there's nobody spotting for the enemy sub to warn him that a destroyer is bearing down on him with depth charges ready to go. But then the friendly Fuso said, no, that's the carrier's job. Yes, really. I don't know. You couldn't make this shit up. Sheep eyeing up the Genizer now. And he's waiting. Because it is an angled battleship, and these are just 14-inch shells. I mean, they're pretty good 14-inch shells, but they're still just 14-inch shells. Armour penetration thresholds are a thing. So wait for the enemy, there we go, to straighten out and give you a nice flat side to shoot at, if at all possible. There you go, much better. Of course, once he's aware that he's getting shot at, it's probably a good idea to angle in towards him and ensure he doesn't do the same thing to you. But I think we're fine. I don't think the Genizer now is, though. That turn to avoid the torpedoes. Well, he's basically just choosing how he wants to die. He can either eat torpedoes and die, or he can expose broadside to a King George V and die. Either way, he's going to die. Speaking of dying, that Mayhan we were talking about has just gotten himself gunned down, and the friendly submarine, the Cachalot, up there in that cap circle with the enemy S1 submarine has just been sunk by the enemy S1 submarine. So, yeah, that's nice. Meanwhile, Sheep 21 is about to have himself some Fubuki problems. Accordingly, he's actually switched to high explosive for what may be the first time in this battle. I'm not 100% sure. But while he is definitely about to have some Fubuki problems, the suicidal Fubuki is about to have significantly bigger problems, largely at the hands of the friendly La Galissoniere. But thanks to some exceptional steering, honestly, check this out. I mean, I told you this thing was manoeuvrable. Look at that. He should be dead. No question about it. That Fubuki is raging right now. But that really was some exceptional steering. Good job. Oh, Königsberg's just finished off the König, which seems appropriate. Königsberg, by the way, named after the former capital of East Prussia. Modern-day Kaliningrad. It's a Soviet enclave sandwiched between Poland and Lithuania. It's a little bit of Russia, right on the Baltic coast of Europe. Sheep's saying there in chat, good effort for Fubuki. He's being a gentleman about it. He's being sporting. It wasn't a good effort. It was a horrible move. It got the Fubuki killed, and it didn't achieve anything. Fubuki should have used the smoke to disengage. He's got the stealth advantage, failed to use it. Speaking of the stealth advantage, there's that S1. Note that the enemy team, despite being down to two, well, okay, we'll call them ships, a submarine and a destroyer, they're still winning. Yeah, you don't call submarine ships, they're boats. I don't know why. I heard that it's because a submarine only has one mast, you know, the conning tower. And if you've only got one mast, you're a boat. Anything with more than one mast is a ship. Yeah, except that's not true. There are all kinds of exceptions. But either way, submarines are boats. If you want to wind up a submariner, ask him what ship he served on. The opposite is also true. Many other times a civilian has tried to yank my chain by asking me what boats I served on. Well, it hasn't happened that often, actually. It's normally just here around Portsmouth where they know the Navy and they actually know the difference. The submarine has dived, and yet Sheep 21 is still spotted. So that means that destroyer's lurking around here somewhere as well. Alright, good to know. Sheep had his spotter up, but it didn't reveal anything, and it's now returned to the ship. The carrier's sending some dive bombers. I have no idea where those dive bombers are going.
Torpedoes, dead ahead.
Seriously. Actually, they might.
Direct front.
They actually might be heading in the right direction. Because those torpedoes are coming from the starboard side. Holy crap, the carrier's done it. Good job, carrier. I am sorry I doubted you. Right. So the enemy Mayhan just got air spotted. And Sheep is no longer detected because the Mayhan has smoked up. which means that the submarine has also dived and is no longer at periscope depth. Which means, oh, and remember, of course, as Sheep is demonstrating, since the primary threat here are torpedoes, you never sail in a straight line at the same speed. But what this means is that in order for anybody to see him coming, unless he fires his guns, in which case, because of the smoke firing penalty, which is going to be very important in a moment, the Mayhan will see him. Either the Mayhan's going to have to poke out of the smoke screen, or the submarine's going to have to come up to periscope. Well, okay. Note, despite sailing right over the top of the submarine is spotted, but Sheep is not until the submarine comes up to periscope depth, at which point, yeah, a bit too late, sunshine. You're dead. Now, because he fired his guns within the battleship's smoke firing penalty range of the Mayhan can see him, even though he has no direct line of sight because there's a smoke screen in the way. Well, it's not really true to say a battleship smoke firing penalty. They're dependent on the calibre of the gun that you're shooting. The Mayhan is firing poxy little 5-inch guns. Sheep just fired dirty great big hoofing 14-inch guns, which is why the Mayhan can see him for the next 20 seconds and he cannot see the Mayhan. But notice that the Mayhan is now shooting at the Le Galissonière on Sheep's port quarter. That's because the Le Galissonière is now close enough to the Mayhan for the Mayhan to see him with the Le Galissonière's smoke firing penalty from his 6-inch guns. And Sheep can now see the Mayhan because destroyers get smoke firing penalties too. They're just very, very short, usually around about 3 kilometres. So the Mayhan is now spotted. The Le Galissonière is there in chat, with absolutely no idea how the Mayhan could see him. And it's surprisingly common. I think most players have no idea that there is such a thing as a smoke firing penalty, and certainly have no idea what the smoke firing penalty of their ship is. I'm not suggesting that everybody should memorise the smoke firing penalty of every calibre of gun in the game, because I don't know the smoke firing penalty of every calibre of gun in the game. But it is a good idea to at least know that it exists and have a general idea of how far away from a smoke screen you can safely fire whatever calibre of gun you have without getting yourself spotted. And that was kill number 6 and a victory for Sheep 21 in HMS King George V. 2,600 base experience. Jolly good show, old bean, if you don't mind my saying so. And I hope you all enjoyed watching him achieve it, because that is pretty much it for today. Be back tomorrow with more Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. In the meantime, as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.